Gather round, my little adventurers, and let's journey back in time to a land of icy fjords and brave warriors. In a small village, nestled between towering cliffs and the cold, gray sea, lived a young Viking named Arvid. He was known throughout the village for his courage, his strength, and most of all, his magnificent silver sword. It was a precious gift, the last thing his father had given him, and Arvid believed it was the source of his power. To him, being strong meant never, ever losing a fight. Every single morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, Arvid would stand by the cliffs, his sword a silver blur as he swung it against the fierce ocean wind. The other children in the village watched him with wide eyes, full of admiration. But his wise old grandmother would often shake her head gently and say, "Arvid, my dear boy, a true warrior doesn't just fight battles. A true warrior protects what is precious." Arvid would nod, but in his heart, he didn't quite understand. One beautiful spring morning, as the stubborn winter snow finally began to melt, the village buzzed with excitement. It was time for their annual sailing trip to a nearby island to trade goods. As everyone loaded the longships, a shadow fell over Arvid. It was Kjell, an older boy who always seemed to find a way to tease him. Kjell pointed at Arvid's gleaming sword and laughed loudly. "You think that shiny piece of metal makes you strong, Arvid? I bet you couldn't even fight the sea." Arvid's jaw tightened, and he gripped the hilt of his sword. "I don't fight for pride," he replied, his voice low. But Kjell's mocking words echoed in his ears all the way to the island. When they arrived and started unloading the supplies, Kjell, being clumsy and careless, bumped into Arvid. There was a terrible clash of metal against rock, and when Arvid looked down, his heart shattered. His father's beautiful sword lay on the ground, broken cleanly in two. "You destroyed my father's sword." Arvid's voice was a raw shout of pain and fury. Kjell stumbled backward, his face pale with fear. "I didn't mean to, it was an accident," he stammered. But Arvid couldn't hear him. He turned his back, his shoulders shaking with a silent, hot anger that felt colder than any winter frost. He felt as though he had lost his father all over again. That very night, the clear sky turned a bruised, angry purple. A terrifying storm rolled in from the sea. The wind howled like a wounded beast, and giant waves slammed against the shore, threatening to smash their precious longships to pieces. The Vikings rushed to secure the ropes, their shouts barely audible over the roar of the storm. In the chaos, Kjell, who was working near the slippery edge of the dock, lost his footing. With a terrified cry, he plunged into the freezing, churning water. Panic erupted. Everyone yelled, pointing into the darkness, but the waves were a violent, black monster, and no one dared to go in. Arvid stood frozen, the broken hilt of his sword still clutched in his hand. He stared at the shattered metal, then at the spot where Kjell was struggling for his life. In that moment, he heard his grandmother's words, "A true warrior protects." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Arvid let the broken hilt fall from his hand. He didn't hesitate. He dove headfirst into the icy sea. The cold was a shocking, brutal slap, stealing his breath, but he pushed through it, swimming with all his might toward the flailing shape in the dark. He reached Kjell, grabbed his tunic, and fought his way back to the dock, pulling the sputtering, exhausted boy with him. They collapsed on the wet planks, coughing and shivering uncontrollably. Kjell looked at Arvid, his eyes wide with disbelief and shame. You saved me, he choked out. After what I did to your sword? A small, tired smile touched Arvid's lips. My sword was just metal, he said, his voice hoarse. But you're a person. My father wouldn't want me to carry hate in my heart more than I value a life. Kill's eyes filled with tears that mingled with the seawater on his face. You're stronger than I could ever hope to be, he whispered. When the storm finally passed and the morning sun returned, the village chief gathered everyone. Today, he announced, his voice ringing with pride, we saw what true strength looks like. It is not found in a sharp sword, but in a heart that is brave enough to forgive. The village blacksmiths offered to forge Arvid a brand new, even finer sword. But Arvid shook his head. Let it stay broken, he said, picking up the two pieces. I'll keep it just like this, as a reminder that mercy is mightier than any steel. From that day forward, the storytellers of the village didn't just sing songs of Arvid the Brave, but of Arvid the kind of Viking who learned that in breaking his sword, he found something far greater, true peace. And that, my dear friends, is the end of our story. Always remember, the bravest and strongest thing you can ever do is choose kindness and forgiveness. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed our tale, please consider subscribing and tapping the little bell so you won't miss our next adventure.